or gold. So anyhow, so this cassette right here is made from Ron Wyatt speaking at the University of Nebraska in March 31st, 1990, at the Love Library Auditorium before the head of the Department of Antiquities, Archaeology, and Ancient History. 500 students were there. The head of the Department of Archaeology came up to me while I was setting up the video player in the auditorium before Ron came in. He was over talking to the president of the university and all, and then he came over afterwards. I did the setup, I introduced him. While I was doing the setup, I was about done, the head of the Department of Archaeology came up to me, professor, and he said, are you Henry Gruver? And I said, yes. So he says, you're the one responsible for getting him here, right? And I said, yes, I'm the contact. And well, he said, listen, he says, I want you to know something. He said, I don't believe Ron Wyatt. I don't believe a word he's saying. And he said, today, I'm going to totally disprove him in front of all these students. Oh. And he started to walk away. And I said, well, good. And he spun around and he said, what did you say? I said, good. He says, wait a minute, I thought you're promoting Ron Wyatt. I said, Professor, I am for the truth. If you can prove Ron is lying and a fraud, that frees me up. He said, I heard your testimony of your tape, you're meeting him. I like you. I believe you. You're a good man. Hang on. Watch what's going to go on today. Ron gave his presentation, showed the video, and then he said, listen, let's put a microphone here in the center aisle and so that everyone can hear the question. And let's go to questions and answers. He says, now let's be polite, all right? And I don't know if this is on this tape, but I'm just giving you what came up to it. And this professor gets up there, and I thought, oh boy, here goes. He starts questioning Ron Wyatt and hitting Ron Wyatt on Ron Wyatt's discovery of the 11 grain elevators or grain bins in Egypt near the pyramid of Giza, and telling him, you said Joseph was the builder of those according to your belief in the Bible. Well, obviously the professor didn't believe the Bible. And Ron Wyatt says to him, he says, well, Professor, I understand your position. Now may I ask you questions? And he began to ask him, he said, there are 2 accounts of Joseph in Egypt. Will you believe that? He said, I know of one. And Ron Wyatt said, is it the cuneiform tablet that they discovered that has inscriptions of Joseph? Yes, that's one, the professor said. Well, he says, the Bible is the second. Well, he says, I don't know if I believe the Bible on that. Ron Wyatt says, now, if I were to show you a whole warehouse full of the history of the Habiru. Ron always referred to them as the Habiru, the Hebrews, in Egypt. Would you believe? When Ron was finished with that presentation there at the University of Nebraska, that professor came up to me and shook my hand. And he said, I don't know how to thank you. Mr. Wyatt answered questions today that I have had since my university days. And he said, the only question I had now for Mr. Wyatt, and I just talked to him, is when can we go to Egypt and see this warehouse full of the history of from Moses all the way through Joseph to the Hebrews in Egypt? And you see, when Ron discovered by scanning that sand, he found 11 massive grain bins. And when the next Pharaoh came along, because we know the Pharaoh died in the Red Sea crossing, when the next Pharaoh came along, he ordered the land of Egypt scoured, cleansed of the history of the Hebrews in Egypt. And they took all the statues, which is a statue of Moses, all this of Joseph, threw them in these grain bins that were now empty, that Joseph had been famous of. Threw them in there and destroyed it all. Well, and covered it up with sand. Ron comes along and they find all of these statues and the whole history of the Hebrews in Egypt in these grain bins. And they've got a warehouse full of them, full of these statues that would prove the Hebrews in Egypt. They're Muslims. They don't want this out because it proves the book of Genesis and it proves the Bible of the Christians, and they are not Christians. So Ron was able to film in the department, and I was with him, of antiquities, pictures of Joseph and Moses, of statues they put in their museum, calling them someone else, but then showing the pyramid that Joseph built. The one that's in there, the carving that's in there, is Joseph. Down under the ground at that pyramid that they found, Ron found under sand, they cleared it out, is a giant room. And I went in there. I'm an eyewitness of it. Ron and the head of Antiquities of Egypt, they really loved Ron Wyatt at that time because of the things he discovered. I went in that room. Now you make your own judgment. Painted on the walls in that room that's just discovered in Ron Wyatt's life, been covered up since the days of Joseph and Moses and all that, since Joseph. Here are the stargazers, the magicians in front of the Pharaoh. He's pointing like, get out of here. You can't interpret my dream. Here comes a man on the paintings of the wall, brought from prison up, out of his prison clothes, put into magician's clothes, standing before the Pharaoh, and he's pointing 7 times. 7 times over. There's going to be a famine at the end of this. So he's pointing, growing grain and putting it in these grain bins and storing it. And then the people are getting thin and the famine is on, and they're bringing the corn and grain up out of these grain bins. It's all in paintings in that room. And I asked, could I videotape that? Oh no pictures? No, nothing. They wouldn't let me tape anything. And they wouldn't let Ron cover anything. It's under the ground there. It's there, and they've sealed it up. They don't want that shown. But it's the whole biblical story of Joseph under the sand there.
Which pyramid?
By the pyramid of Giza.
Is it open to
the
the
one
public?
out there that Ron says, not the Great Pyramid, the pyramid of the other pyramid
By the Isa.
out by Giza.
by
Yeah,
Giza.
you have to go to a different place to that one.
Is it
And
open to the public?
the pyramid of Giza is, you can go visit it. And
But the one
if
for
you pay the
Joseph.
guide enough, I'll bet you he would get you down there. Now Ron, we were with the head of the Department of Antiquities, and he took us down there, and he said, this is not normally shown, but we want to show you. I was with him, and Ron wanted me to see it. And so they let us in there because we were with the head of the Department of Antiquities, and I saw it. I saw it. It's there. The whole story of Joseph. He was telling how they've analyzed the paint. There is no paint on the earth, he said at this time, that is of that quality. We don't even know what it consists of. And he told us in the Great Pyramid, I went down into the Great Pyramid where they don't know if it's a tomb or what down in there. You ever go down in there, don't have asthma or any breathing problem. The air gets so stagnant you almost suffocate. You've got to have good lungs to go down there. And don't hurry down there. Take your time if they give you a tour down there. Don't try to rush it. Don't be short on breath when you get down there, or you might pass out. The air is so stagnant down in the middle of that pyramid. But the head of Antiquities said, he showed us a place, he said, right here, when we opened this and found this opening by subsurface interface radar scanning, they can tell where the openings are. We knew where the entrance was. When we pulled that stone away, the suction of air went in there. It was a perfect vacuum. those stones were so well fitted in our generation, still there was a vacuum there. So not much air had got in. They've left it open so air could get in there, but they don't pump. They should put a hose and air down in there because people pass out down in there. But he was telling a part of the way down, there's a pocket like on the side, and he's telling how they have in their labs, they have a plate of lead that looks just like a plate that you would make a car battery out of. How could that have got in there?